fish up the coast. Mostly north of the coast, all the way up to Point Conception, and then I even go to the Channel Islands, so out to Santa Cruz or Santa Rosa or San Miguel Island. I definitely prefer fishing with another person. If I had a choice, I would fish with a partner. When I'm diving, I'm generally by myself. I am by myself. But when I'm trapping, I am the deckhand. I fish off of another boat when I'm trapping the crab and lobster and fish and prawns. I've definitely learned it through my dad. He was not a commercial fisherman, but he's very, into the ocean. Mostly free diving when I was growing up. It was free diving to get dinner. That's where we got our seafood, was the ocean. There wasn't an option to go to the store. Just take what we needed. I still practice that. A day of diving is, I go out to my spot, my secret spot. I dive down I have a bag with a float on it, and I have a rake in one hand and also a measuring gauge, because we have a minimum size limit so I can't catch small ones. And I'll open up a few of them to see what the quality is like. If the quality is good, then I'll continue in picking those urchins, because generally they're the same one, the same quality in that area. And then if they're not very good, then I'll come back up and move the boat and go somewhere else. The idea is to fill up the bag. Before I go diving, I actually hang some other bags off of my boat, off the side of my boat. So when I fill up a bag, fill up a float, and my urchins will go to the surface, I'll swim into the boat, latch them onto my boat, and get another bag and go back and get it and fill up the next bag until I have no more bags. I bring them up on board with the davit, and I have a hand little pulley davit, less things to break on my boat. I bring them back to port, and a lot of them I sell directly to the consumer, to restaurants, and sometimes I'll sell to a processor. Part of the process of being processed is to put them in some alum as a preservative, and that does alter the taste. So I've gotten a lot of comments back, people who have eaten uni in the sushi restaurant and they don't quite like it, but I have them try my urchin from the shell, and it's a different story. The ocean is something I've always known. I've gotten my food there, I've played in it, on it. When I was growing up, I never liked school until my junior year of college. And I started taking the upper division marine biology classes, and I loved school and academia after that. I was given very good opportunities when I was in college. In a nutshell, I got paid to count fish. After Tahiti, I came back to Santa Barbara. I was working with the university on another project. I was counting fish and invertebrates and algae all the way from Oregon to Mexico. Do a lot of surveys. I realized that I wanted to continue, this lifestyle, this livelihood. So I went to Australia and worked for one of the best tropical marine ecologists in the world named Howard Choate. Loved it. First, I couldn't get a job because I came back before I was completely done with my dissertation, so no one would give me a job because I didn't quite have my diploma yet. And so I got a job as a deckhand in Santa Barbara on fishing boats, and got into the politics of fishing and realized it was very similar to my grad school work. So I go to meetings, do some policy things and management things and education and outreach, and then go fishing, wearing fins one day and heels the next. During that time, I did get a job teaching. I worked my way up the ladder, and then budget cuts came, bad economy came. I finally realized that I see a better future in fishing than I do in the higher education system. So I focused on developing my business, fishing. Probably the best decision I ever made, being, in the economic times, being in business for myself is perfect. As a woman in the fishing industry, I think that as a fisherman, I think that I'm extremely lucky. I've gotten the opportunity to learn from quite a few fishermen in the community. I think they were a little bit more open to sharing their knowledge because I'm not as big of a competition as a male my age. I think that a lot of people appreciated my efforts, my political efforts, so they wanted to help me in with the part that allowed me to make money, allowed me to earn a living. Because the meetings part does not. Some examples of that would be fishermen want certain kind of regulations that the government just does not want to address. Or a lot of times there's some environmentalists who want to step in and try to shut us down for not very legitimate reasons. I've encountered a lot of extreme conservationists. As they're eating their sushi, they're telling me how much they hate me as a fisherman. And I find that completely ironic. I've had a couple people say, oh, it's okay because that seafood's from China. They don't want people eating seafood from their backyard, but it's the most responsibly caught seafood in the world. There's other fisheries around the world that are modeling California management strategies. You can't take seafood faster than that species or that population can reproduce itself. We're figuring out ways to find out the thresholds, species by species, and limiting our take. If that resource was gone, we'd be out of a job. So we're actually the biggest advocates for trying to preserve that resource. You have to think of it as a farmer's market or a fisherman's market. It's the exact same deal, except for we don't get subsidized. If there's bad weather, if there's an El Nino, if there's some kind of marine catastrophe, we don't get subsidized like a lot of farmers do. So it's just something to keep in mind. Consumers and community do need to better understand all that it takes to go get their protein source. So it's actually really beneficial to know your fishermen. For the next generations of fishermen, I hope for plenty of fish. I hope plenty of seafood. I hope for and making a livelihood out of it. Continuing to be able to have a livelihood, because it's an honest living. You go down to the harbor and you see us unloading all of our seafood, and you see all the fishing boats and the salty dogs and the camaraderie, and that could be replaced by a bunch of fish pens. How boring. I mean, as much as we do compete against each other, we do have each other's backs too. It's definitely a win-win, a give and take. So I'm still new at this. These guys have been going for 30, 60 years, some of them. So I got a long way to go.
Carrying the torch from the heart. Well, it means being available, being willing to educate, and being able to help out your fellow Chumash or anybody, I don't care who it is. Haku, Kakti Ernestine. I'm 1/4 Chumash from my mother, Mary J. Yee, family Ignacio, and I've been here since I was 2 years old. I'm 74 now. My mother didn't make a big deal of it, but she didn't go hiding, and no, we weren't born in a cave, so nobody knew. She was fortunate to be raised in the old way, when you're raised by grandparents. And so when she was raising me, she didn't emphasize, that you're a Chumash, you will live as a Chumash and do as a Chumash. No. She did with Catholicism. No. I did have an uncle who is buried here. He was full blood, and he loved me, but we didn't communicate because I was little and he was in his 80s, and he spoke mainly Chumash. I asked my mother one time to teach me how to speak Chumash, because she said to me one time, Kitzats Aktinan. And I said, oh. And I could, of course, couldn't follow that. When I asked her what it meant, she said, I'm going to slap you. That's what it means in Chumash. And she also had the same sense of humor. That's where I got it. She would tell me all the stories of what she was raised up as, and that's how my upbringing was in my household. All of us, actually, we were brought up, I guess I have to flash back and forth between religion because that's a way to identify. I was raised according to parables. You know, not parables of the Bible, but mainly of my culture. And it all worked out because it was all so true. Bad associates were associated with stories of bad associates in the animal world because that's what they thought of, you know, animals being the first people. And so all the stories were like what you see in kiddie books, but it wasn't a kiddie story. We were here first. And yes, we're 13,000-year-old squatters, but that beats the heck out of what's come in here and destroyed this land. Get back to the basics, because that's why we and the entire world is going down the toilet. My mother's going to turn over in her grave because I never listened to her. But now I quote her everywhere I go, because I remember those stories now. They're as vivid as anything, but when I was a young person and a teenager, to heck with those stories. I was going to do what I was going to do. My mother was my hero, my best friend, and the best mother and nurse you could think of. She came up with remedies that nobody else came up with. But I was in the middle of my nursing career, and I saw that they had an infirmary here, and I was about ready for a change. Ended up getting a job here. And from then it took off. I fell in love with the guys here. Lo and behold, be careful what you ask for. I ended up with, I forgot, I think I had 14 or something like that in the infirmary. Oh, they were all retired friars. They were Franciscan brothers and priests and little misfits. I come on, I'm new, I'm terrified, you know, I'm going to be taking care of priests and oh my God, you know. And he looks at me like this, and I'm in there trying to get adjusted to them. And so I'm feeding. They said, well, help whoever isn't able to feed themselves. So here I am feeding him, and he's letting me feed him and going on and on. Then at the end, he looks at me, and I turn around, I'm doing something, and he's feeding himself. Oh. I said, you rascal. You know, laughing.
Dancing and singing and telling stories and their myths, and it was so similar to American Indians. Even the houses they were living in were. And of course there are ancient historical connections between the American Indians and the people of Siberia. Go up this way. Well, it's a spectacular location. Inside, or on the outside especially, it's covered with cupules that they were pecked in by Chumash Indians. I grew up with a butterfly net in my hand, basically. A lot of our camping trips and family vacations were in places where we would go collecting, and he would hang up ultraviolet light at night to attract the moths. For a while, as I was growing up, thought I was going to become an entomologist. I was going to study insects. But later on, I discovered archaeology. I was just trying to see if you could get a shot of the cave. Okay. Yeah, see, the cave is right over here. You can see the big exposed sandstone there. We were Boy Scouts. We didn't have a lot of archaeological field experience, although we were being supervised. And it was at a location where there had been a hotel at one time. So it was already a disturbed site, so it wasn't too much harm being done by allowing us to do the excavation there. But it was full of fish bone and sea mammal bone and shells. It was really interesting. And so I converted part of our family garage into a archaeology lab, and I was bagging the bone and studying it. So that was kind of my first introduction to archaeology. We know that many of the Chumash village sites have boulders like this near them that are covered with cupules that are pecked into the rocks by Chumash Indians. And the whole side of the top of this formation is covered with these cupules. They're ceremonial, and we're not sure their exact significance, but they oftentimes are found in association with rock art, with rock paintings. At UCSB, I got a degree in cultural anthropology, but at the time I finished up, I wasn't so sure I wanted to go into anthropology as a profession. I began thinking maybe I wanted to be a teacher, or like my parents. I tried sales for a while. I was practicing yoga and teaching yoga classes. I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I saw an advertisement for summer seasonal work in the Forest Service. And so I applied for that and went to work as a firefighter, stationed up at San Marcos Pass on a tanker crew. And at the end of fire season, they kept me on to do archaeological field survey in the Santa Barbara backcountry. I did that for 2 years, and I really decided, well, this is what I love doing. Archaeology is what I want to do for my career, and so at that point I decided to go back to graduate school. See, the Forest Service consulted with some of the Chumash, and they put in a sign with a Chumash word, Alalkulek, caretaker. Creator gave us sacred places we have not forgot. Not just rocks with paintings, but all that is around here, guardian spirit rocks as well. We strive to protect and pray you respect this place. It says Chumash elders Poli Adelina. This pictograph is here, but it doesn't. This is actually a negative image. It's red on the sandstone. My doctoral dissertation at UCA Santa Barbara was studying Chumash social organization. When I was in the Forest Service, I got interested in the sites I was visiting, wondering who were the people who lived at these places. Mission records recorded the names of these Chumash villages and the people who had lived in them. So I began doing genealogical work, working my way through the mission records. And I started meeting Chumash Indians, descendants of the people who had lived in these places, one of them being Ernestine de Soto, whose mother was the last Chumash speaker, and other Chumash Indians too on San Ynez Reservation or in Ventura or San Luis Obispo. And I worked with these people to help them recover information about their family genealogy. All that kind of came out of the work I was doing for my dissertation research. It's now part of what I do. There's paintings in there. And then there's paintings up over here too. But this is the kind of the most dominant figure is this guy, whoever he is. To his upper right, you've got it like this actually occurs in more than one site where you have a kind of a central figure, and up to his upper right there's some kind of star-like motif or something. We don't know whether that's might mean something. Now the other thing you'll notice here, see all the lead? People were using this as target practice. I think most of that happened in the 60s or so, when there was people coming in here and plinking, plinkers coming in and shooting at bottles and breaking glass, which is a shame. As I was finishing up work on my dissertation, or I was getting close, I was offered a job to become forest archaeologist of Los Padres National Forest. But at the same time, they were advertising for the curator of anthropology here at the Museum of Natural History. So I worked for the Forest Service as forest archaeologist for about 5 months, but then the museum hired me with the condition that I complete work on my dissertation before they would make me a full curator. And I've been at the museum ever since. I was hired in 1986, and so that's 27 years now. So there's all kinds of things that are exciting associated with my job. One thing that I never would have expected was that I'd be doing work at a site called Arlington Springs on Santa Rosa Island. Little did I know this would turn into a multi-year project. The research into DNA was also something I never anticipated getting involved in. I told a biological anthropologist, professor of mine, Phil Walker out at UCSB, I told him of my interest in studying genetics, and he got me started. Initially, I plucked people's hair and worked with a molecular anthropologist looking at the DNA from hair follicles. And later on, it was cheek swabs. Now it's saliva. But anyway, we've, over the years now, begun to reconstruct the fact that there's different groups of California Indians that descend from different migrations into California, and all of this has come out of this DNA study. One of the things that interests me is to use what are referred to as the 4 fields of anthropology and see if there's something we can learn from all of those and how there's feedback between those different subdisciplines. So one of them is the field of linguistics. The genetics tell us that the Chumash Indians are unique. Archaeology shows that there's a long prehistory of Chumash Indians in this area. And ethnography, using the records of the missions, the ethnohistoric records, all of these different lines of information can inform us about the ancient presence of Chumash Indians in the Santa Barbara region. I don't think that I'll ever be finished in studying the native people of this region. The more you learn, of course, it's a truism perhaps, but the more you realize how much you don't know and how much more there is to learn.